I am Luis Ortega. I'm a Vice President with Allied Universal's Risk Advisory and Consulting Services Division. We provide security and consulting services to our clients. And I'm joined by an esteemed panel of experts who will lend expertise and advice on this important matter. They are Chris Brown, Senior Network Security Instructor and Cyber Subject Matter Expert at Corelight.
Yep. Hi, I'm Chris. I've been with Corelight since about mid-2021. Before that, Focal Point Federal, and they were acquired by CDW. I'm still teaching for them 4 to 5 times a year. They hold my government clearances, and I'm dedicated to a 3-letter agency out of Fort Meade, which I'm not supposed to say anyway. Before that, Elastic, and before that, I worked for Mr. Mandia for 6 years at Mandia and FireEye.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence Embil, Enterprise Security Manager, Miami-Dade County.
Thanks, Louis. Lawrence Embil, Miami-Dade County. I manage the Cybersecurity Incident Response Team, the Security Architecture Team, and the GRC component to that. My team is deeply involved with anything critical infrastructure. We help support everything from the airport to the water and sewer system to mass transit, traffic signals, and our first responders.
Thank you, Lawrence. Mr. Morgan Wright, Chief Security Advisor at Sentinel-1.
Hey, welcome everybody. Morgan Wright. I came out of a background of state and local law enforcement, so how did I get into the computer stuff? Because I was lazy, and I saw Bill Gates was much richer than Michael Jordan. It's true. But when I moved out to Virginia, a lot of my work was DoD intelligence related, so I spent a lot of time working in those environments. Used to teach at the National Security Agency, National Cryptologic School, behavior analysis, interview and interrogation, and then State Department Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. But in 2012, I spent 6 months here in Florida. I was the Senior Law Enforcement Advisor for the Republican National Convention and a few other things. But there we go.
Thank you. And Mr. Paul Martini, Chief Executive Officer at iBoss.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you guys. So Paul Martini, I'm the CEO of iBoss. I've done anything from networking to cybersecurity. I hold over 250 patents on both sides. We work in an area called Zero Trust, which is controlling access to sensitive resources, critical infrastructure. We see over 150 billion transactions every single day between users, devices, and critical resources. Lots of interesting information and data. It's good to be here with you guys.
Thank you, Paul. As we all know, cybersecurity is no longer just a concern for governments or large corporations, but a vital issue that affects all of us, from individuals to small businesses to critical infrastructure. This discussion will explore the challenges and risks associated with cybersecurity in today's complex landscapes. Our panelists will render their expertise and their recommendations to the same. This is about cyber terrorism and critical infrastructure. So let's begin with some definitions. Chris, you're an instructor, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're an instructor.
That's what they
tell me. So can you help us with a definition of cyber terrorism and who are the major actors?
Yeah, so cyber terrorism really isn't much different from traditional terrorism. It's just how the engagements go down, so to speak. So, to undermine confidence, to deteriorate or erode infrastructure, to strike fear and terror into mass populations. It's just done through cyber mechanisms. So the second part of the question, I'm going to give you the traditional DoD answer because I still teach for DoD and other agencies, Russians, Iranians, North Koreans. But it could be anybody. It could be any organization. There's a lot of intrusion problem set threat actors out there, nation states, sophisticated cybercrime groups. It could really be coming from pretty much anywhere.
So criminal and state actors, right?
Oh, yeah. Anyone that's got a lot of money that has a goal that they want to implement across the wire, or RF or optics or whatever. If it's a big enough organization, they want to make a statement, they want to strike terror in the fear of everyone, they'll do it.
Morgan, when you advise your clients, what you tell them that are the primary motivators or objectives, and who are they targeting?
So I'll make a quick analogy. When I was instructing out at NSA, we were teaching the damage assessment agents. People went in when there's a security breach, a breach of classified information. They went in to figure out how it was done. Now, the FBI conducted the actual criminal investigation, but they did the internal stuff. And it was very easy during those times because really what did Russia want, China want, even whoever, Cuba? You guys remember one of the biggest cases, Ana Montez, DIA, 25 years, working for Cuba. So what they're after is intelligence and information. However, though, we're seeing a hybrid when you look at North Korea. Take a look at the Lazarus Group, the General Reconnaissance Bureau. They are actually in it for the money, too. Why? Because they're a heavily sanctioned nation. Iran has not got to that point yet, but North Korea going after cryptocurrency. In fact, there's a case right now ongoing where they're sitting on $100 million. They tried to move some of it. The FBI seized $1 million of it, but now because it's crypto, the other 99 is locked up. Basically, it's worthless now. But they use that. Their failed attempt at WannaCry ransomware, using the Windows SMB vulnerability. Thank you, NSA. I didn't say that, did I? Apologize. But they weaponize that. They turn that around. They try to say, can we do stuff? But then you get into transnational criminal groups. DarkSide, which did the Colonial Pipeline hack, they operate, for example, in Russia with the implicit approval of the Russian government. Vladimir Putin allows them. Why? Because we use proxies as well. In the intelligence community, at DoD, it's third parties, because it gives you plausible deniability. That's why the Wagner Group is being used by Russia a lot. We see the same things in warfare. We see the same things in cyberspace. And remember now, cyberspace is the fifth domain of war: sea, air, land, space, cyberspace. But bouncing off, Kevin and I had a quick chat at the airport for coming out. I think the sixth area is going to be headspace. That's the other thing these transnational groups and threat actors are going after, is the cognitive attacks against us. There's many motivations, but normally it's criminal is after money usually. But you'll get hybrid nations who are after money, like Iran and North Korea. But then mostly it's intelligence espionage.
Understood. So what about cyber attacks on critical infrastructure? So, Lawrence, you're in government, right? You've been in government for a while.
Yeah.
And there are 16 critical infrastructure sectors.
Correct.
IT, food, financial services, commercial facilities, government facilities, water, wastewater, all these, right? So what are the most common attack vectors on critical infrastructure that we have seen?
That's a great question. Something that's very common is the watering hole attack, trying to get people who manage the critical infrastructure to visit the poisoned well, maybe share a file or a keygen type tool that they think is going to help them do their job. Another one, obviously phishing. We've all seen the phishing attacks. I don't need to go into that one. There's obviously the insider who's been flipped or is just upset. Maybe they didn't get the promotion they wanted, and now they're upset and they want to do some damage. And a lot of these, especially the watering hole and the phishing attacks, can lead to ransomware, which can flatten the system. Obviously, the insider could be non-malicious, but maybe made a misconfiguration. We saw that with a water system in San Francisco, where the attackers started tweaking the water quality to basically poison it. And a few weeks after that, Oldsmar here in Florida was attacked in this similar manner.
What other attacks on critical infrastructure can we relate to? Morgan, you mentioned Colonial Pipeline, right?
Yeah, so here's the other thing, too. When I said they're attacking headspace, how did people react when they perceived that there was a shortage of oil? We've got the iconic picture of the lady pouring gasoline into the plastic bag and putting it in her trunk, right? What would we don't laugh. This is how people react to what is perceived, right? So I was actually looking up something. I came out of Kansas. I have some friends on the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. In 2018, between 2012 and 2018, 4 Russians attacked about 100 countries, thousands of computers, and they were attacking critical infrastructure. I think it was FSB Center 16, but they got into Wolf Creek Nuclear Plant in Kansas, southeast Kansas. Mm-hmm. And I said on a scale of 1 to 10, what was your pucker factor? 10, like it's the worst. He said it was a 13. They actually were able to touch the industrial control systems. Now, they didn't do anything because it's part of preparation of the battlefield. SolarWinds was collecting information. It's preparation of the battlefield. They want to see where our vulnerabilities are and where else we're vulnerable. You look at that, you look at the energy grid, things like that. They don't have to take the whole thing down, but last comment, if you want to bring a nation to its knees, you go after 2 things, power and water. And those are the 2 of the critical infrastructures I think we've really got to put a lot of focus on.
Power and water, yes. Let's relate to something that's been happening for a year now overseas, and that's the Ukraine and Russia war, and it's already been mentioned. In February, the Washington Post reported that, and I quote, Russia's cyberspace attacks on Ukraine during the past year have erased data, degraded communication, and stolen information. But they have fallen far short of the destruction that many predicted after the invasion a year ago. In fact, they say that the impact of the war is that cybersecurity has improved for all. Paul, what do they mean by that?
Yeah, so I like to correlate our digital world to physical world. If we think about attacks like this from Ukraine, and we're all expecting a nuclear bomb to be dropped, Just because we don't see a nuclear bomb from North Korea being dropped doesn't mean that the risk isn't there. But we see these sustained attacks that are persistent, so advanced persistent attacks, many attacking even businesses and critical infrastructure, obviously for financial gain. And especially a lot of these countries are tied in sanction, so they need to find ways to monetize and to get funds. So we have seen a sustained number of attacks. We see this, all the Colonial Pipeline is a good one, but we see a sheer number of sustained attacks across not just critical infrastructures and government, but we're also seeing this on a daily basis within businesses of any size. Actually, I was just at RSA talking to some of the responders, and they're saying that they've gotten really good at negotiating the ransomware prices. We're trying to correlate to see where those prices are coming in at. Small business now they're negotiating from $2 million to $400,000. That's just a small business. So you can imagine if these attacks hit a city or a water line or water supply, there's a lot more financial gain. Typically, Bitcoin, you start seeing those amounts going to the 100 million or more in rising.
Yeah, they say that it was like as if the Ukrainians were inoculated from all these years of attacks, right? They got a cyber vaccine, right? They had been working for a while with U.S. governments and major tech companies to share best practices, to get warnings of new types of attacks, to instill best practices like two-factor authentication, working with other cloud vendors that were accessible from anywhere. Chris?
Yeah. There's so many different angles that cyber terrorism could take. In fact, one of them, or one campaign that went down just 4 or 5 months ago, was a hospital. I forget which hospital it was, but the ransomware threat actors said, pay the money. Hospital said, no, we're not going to pay the money. We've got a resiliency plan. So instead what they did was they went after the patients of the hospital, contacted each one of them individually and said, your hospital's not paying, we expect you to pay. Now we're going to discount it, if that's any better. But wow. That leading up to the question of who can be impacted, anybody could be impacted.
Of course. Yep.
Hey, Luis, could I have 2 cents of that? This is Morgan's theory. It's the Hunt for Red October theory. Who's seen the movie?
Oh, yeah.
Give me one
of
ping
my
for
favorites.
Sully, one ping only, right? Sean Connery. What happened when the Knavalov fired the first torpedo? It bounced off Red October because they closed the distance, right? What did he do with the second torpedo?
Took off the
full safeties off, and now he said, you arrogant bastard, you killed us all, because the fish came back and blew him up. What I think happened in Ukraine, if you go back to 2017, the most destructive ransomware attack was NotPetya. That was a supply chain attack against Embil in Ukraine. It jumped containment. It hit Maersk and other people. So what they learned, if you guys go back and watch what is being said, you have to read into the communications. There was this thing called acid rain, which attacked routers and modems with Viasat, took those out, but it also jumped containment. It hit Germany. Germany was not going to provide anything until that happened. What they did, then you had on February 28th, the Deputy Secretary of NATO came out and said, we consider cyber to be an operational domain. That is firing a shot across Russia's bow. A massive attack on one, it invokes Article 5. So what you saw happen, what my theory is, the reason these things started landing with duds, they started really restricting the IP ranges, the things they attacked, because they did not want some of their malware attacking a NATO country, because that would have invoked the full wrath of the U.S., Britain, Estonia. One of the NATO Cyber Lab Center of Excellence is over there. That's one thing. That's just Morgan's theory. It's the Hunt for Red October theory. It's patented, trademark. You can't use it without permission of Ricky Bobby Inc.
Makes total sense. Yeah. So we've been talking about government, right? About critical infrastructure. So we have business owners here in the audience. So Chris, why should business owners care about critical infrastructure and cyber terrorism?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know a lot of people may think, especially if you're a small to medium business or maybe educational institution or small K-12 organization, but as long as you have laptops, servers, anything, if a nation state or a terrorism group wants to go after it, they'll find a way to go after it. And I can put it in terms that I had a talk with my wife and our 16-year-old daughter about this. About 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, Microsoft said that all they need is 3 seconds of your voice to totally reproduce a conversation that sounds like it's coming exactly from you. And if any of you have watched CNN the past couple of days, I think it was The Weeknd and Drake, artificial intelligence made songs from those 2 artists, and everyone was like, so who's going to get paid? Do you pay the artist? Do you pay the AI? Anyway, when that article came out from Microsoft, I sat the wife down, I sat the 16-year-old daughter down, I said, think it's time we have a family safe phrase. He said, safe phrase? What are you talking about? I said, look, I'm never home. I do a lot of domestic and international travel for teaching. And I said, if you get a call from me, and it totally sounds wacky, but it's, hey, I'm in jail. I'm over in the Netherlands. I need you to wire, I don't know, $10,000 to wherever. The response back should be, all right, we'll wire you whatever you want. What's the family safe phrase? Or what's that phrase you told me if this sounds totally weird? Because if AI comes back with that kind of answer, then we're all screwed. But hopefully that's not the case. I'm just saying, I use that as an example because anybody could have impacts from cyber terrorism. And it's scary, but it's the reality of the world we live in today.
We're all friends here. What's your phrase? Just so that we know if it's you or not.
We haven't had enough beer or vodka or whiskey for that yet.
All right, 5:30, we're going to check out Chris's phrase. Yeah. Paul, for commercial business, what general measures does IBOS, for example, recommend should be taken to protect against IoT attacks?
Yeah, so I'm going to reinforce what Kevin Mandia was talking about. I'm a big proponent of NIST, particularly if you haven't had a chance to look at the NIST 800-207, which is Zero Trust Architecture. It's an extensive publication, 59 pages, but it does describe how to create an architecture around your organization to reduce risk substantially, around using the principles of Zero Trust. Zero Trust is widely used, but they give a particular definition, which is really about access controls and moving access controls beyond the login. So I think one of the issues and one of the challenges is historically we've assumed that once you log in, you can have free reign to the systems. And this idea that they propose is very similar to an airport security checkpoint. Anytime you're going to cross into the boarding area, you have to cross the checkpoint. So you can't just show your ID and have free reign to the plane. You got to scan the bags, you got to check the ID, and you got to make sure there's nothing that's going to harm a plane. In our world, digitally, we're not protecting airplanes. We're protecting digital data, systems, and applications. And this idea that you can put a digital checkpoint in front of those applications, much like you would in the older approaches, which is using firewalls and physical appliances and things of that nature. But imagine doing something similar, except using software that's available everywhere. So it sits in front of your SaaS applications, it sits in front of your critical infrastructure, your servers, and it's available to all the users. But I think the best way to reduce risk is to follow this principle of Zero Trust, particularly from the 800-207. Reduce the risk by reducing the surface area to the critical applications and services. If there's no access, and actually you made a point about Russia, about cutting IP space, those are principles of Zero Trust. If there is no access, it doesn't matter if the application is vulnerable. You should patch. But applications will become vulnerable. It doesn't matter if someone has their credentials. If they can't punch those credentials into the system, they can't access that system. And that goes way beyond the login and in getting to a point where we're getting this per request access decisions, continuous adaptive access, so that as soon as we see that source address come from Russia, even though that session is active, we can deny access. There's just no harm. And so I think it's one of the best ways to protect critical infrastructure.
So for example, some governments have outright banned Hikvision and Kaspersky, right? Hardware and software. So is that a legitimate concern? Should we be worried about it, or that's part of the NDAA?
Sure. It is part of the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. The government listed certain companies Chinese-based that we could not purchase from. State and local governments have also taken that lead. So you'll see a lot of that in your local areas, your state and local governments. One thing that I would say we've seen repeated over and over again today is anyone can be a victim, anyone can be a target. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a government. You don't have to be the Raytheon. You don't have to be the Lockheed. Anyone can be a target because the attackers may not like the country you're in, may not like the city you're in, may not like just any principle that you might happen to have, and that's where they would pick any of us. So.
Yes. Morgan, what are you recommending your clients, Morgan?
Oh, us?
Yes.
Don't connect your refrigerator to the internet. There's no reason for your refrigerator to be connected to the internet. You have to reevaluate your life. No, really, it's everything. Yeah. What about your wife? Oh, I thought you said reevaluate your wife. No, I'm sorry. Can't help you with that, bro. All right. Well, you need a beer before that. No, it's one of those things we can connect it. One of the things you got to think about, too, I go back to the Black Energy attack, December 23rd, 2015. Just real quick history lesson. Why'd they pick December 23rd, 2015? Because December 23rd, 2014, Ukraine voted 303 to join which organization? NATO. This was punishment for them. And what they did is they tried to segregate everything. They tried to keep things separate. They weren't doing quite zero trust, but they had things that were never designed to be connected to the internet, like the breakers and stuff. So they had serial to Ethernet connectors. So what they did is they attacked those. They attacked the firmware on that. So my point is, when you start thinking about this stuff, I think sometimes the problem isn't the way you think about the problem. There's only one problem that matters, and that's the way your adversary thinks about the problem. So when it comes to IoT, it's not, hey, this is what we think we ought to do. It's sitting back and looking at, from a true red team standpoint or getting other people in, if we were going to do this, IoT probably is going to be one of the easiest ways to do it because it's like the printer. People forget about the printer. But yet there's a business in Northern Virginia, all they do is they take needle nose pliers and break the chips off of inkjet cartridges. You know why? Because inkjet cartridges hold code. You ever put an inkjet cartridge in and it says, congratulations, genuine HP cartridge? How does it know that? When it comes to IoT, I think we look past it, and if we don't institute the principles, so what we advise and stuff is that you can't manage what you can't measure. If you don't know what your environment is, it doesn't matter what you do. And part of it is it's no longer trust but verify. It's verify first, then trust. I can tell you, speaking of the classified space, there may have been more than one person wanted to be mobile and decided to hook a wireless AP up to a classified system back when before you could detect those things. That was a no. But they didn't know it. You know why? Because they had no tools. They had no way to measure it. So you can't manage what you measure. Understand your environment first, then you can take action.
Absolutely. So back to government. In 2011, the DoD published a guidance called the Department of Defense Strategy for Operating on Cyberspace. And they had 5 guiding goals. And 2 of them were treat cyberspace as an operational domain, say like the 5th Fleet in Central Command, right? Number 2, to support the development of a cyber workforce capable of rapid technological innovation, right? So some of the existing regulations that we know, HIPAA from 96, GLB from 99, 2002 Homeland Security Act that also introduced the Federal Information Security Management Act, FISMA, right? Lawrence, what information can you share regarding upcoming regulations or maybe some funding opportunities to invest in protecting against cyber threats?
Thankfully, the federal government space has taken this very seriously. There was a bipartisan bill that just was signed. It provides about $1.2 billion for cybersecurity. It depends what space you're in, what line of business you're in, but that's available. I know that there was, on the other side, for nonprofits, there was another bill that was passed, and that one provided $305 million. Sometimes we think of the nonprofits that they have a greater goal to serve the community or serve a certain group of people. They can benefit from that grant funding as well.
FEMA has some funding.
It is a FEMA grant, yes.
That's FEMA, right?
Yes.
And it's not just for governments, but also for private entities.
It can be for any nonprofit.
Any nonprofit, excellent.
Mm-hmm. And it is through FEMA.
It's through FEMA, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Available at the FEMA website, I'm sure.
Yes. A quick Google search will find it.
Cool. Morgan, do you think that regulations that are in place are upcoming, are they enough, or are they too many or too few?
Oh, no, I think everybody here would vote for more regulations, right? We want more. In 2013, I testified before Congress on the security of healthcare.gov. Here's a quick insight. The original security plan for healthcare.gov, 25 lines on an Excel spreadsheet. That's the way when you look at healthcare. Healthcare was one of the industries that there was a lot of lawsuits in, a lot of litigation. The bank and finance, they've got a lot of regulation. But the one thing, there's a phase everybody goes through, and it's 3 phases. How many people have heard of Sarbanes-Oxley? The reason we have that is because people like Bernie Ebbers and Regal's Adelphia and stuff, they misrepresented the information on the 10Ks. So you go through 3 phases. First, there's litigation, shareholder suits, people suing, lawyers suing you. Then when litigation doesn't work, you go to regulation. So you got SEC or HIPAA. One of the reasons HIPAA came out, we had gotten to the regulation, or that was legislation, I'm sorry, but you get regulation, so SEC does stuff. Then you get to legislation. So they legislated Sarbanes-Oxley, and now it's law. What I see happening in cyber is unless we take affirmative steps to tamp this down, what's going to happen is pretty soon we're going to have some laws but we're going to have to live with. One of the ones I think needs changing, though, is the data breach reporting. This is like a 50 matrix chess, 3D, it's 12D chess. If I'm in Georgia and I'm a credit company, I don't know, begins with an E, and I get hacked, Who has priority? Texas has a different law. California has a law. So at some point, I think they need to have a law. California and New York are saying, yeah, but the federal law wouldn't have been as tough as our laws. But we've got to rationalize legislation these regulations, because otherwise what we'll end up with is a patchwork quilt, which increases the cost of response. So there is a need for legislation, Sarbanes-Oxley. When's the last time you guys saw a CEO perp walked in orange going to jail for misrepresenting their 10K?
Right.
So that's effective legislation does that, but ready, fire, aim, that gets you bad law, and then we have to live with it.
Absolutely. So we're on a college campus. We have some students probably watching us and probably in the audience as well. So for our next generation of cyber defenders, what advice can each one of you, and maybe a couple of minutes each one, can you give to prevent a skills gap in cybersecurity? Chris.
The first thing I would tell anyone is find your passion, whatever that is, in information security. I was doing information technology from the late 90s up until about 2002. And I was a Microsoft trainer, and another Microsoft trainer, I remember this, was in Washington, D.C. He lays a book down on my desk after class. He was teaching another class. He said, "You seem a little interested in security. Why don't you read this book?" And it was Clifford Stoll's The Cuckoo's Egg. I read that book, and it changed my life, 100%. I said, that's it. All I want to do is information security, and that's how it has turned out. That book had such an impact on me that in 2018, when I was getting ready to transition out of FireEye, at the end of 2018, I contacted Mr. Stoll because he puts his phone number on all his acetate slides, if any of you have seen him do presentations before. So I just called, and he said, "I don't recognize your number. Are you law enforcement?" I said, "No, Mr. Stoll. I'm a guy that read your book and totally changed my life." He said, "Oh, I'll be happy to talk to you." We talked for 3 hours. But I would say find your passion, whether it's malware analysis, whether it's incident response, whether it's threat hunting, whether it's reverse engineering. You just got to be passionate about it. Like my dad was a Raytheon field engineer and field engineering instructor for 35 years. And I said, "Dad, I want to go out and see the world." He said, "You want to go out and see the world?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Make sure someone else pays for it." I said, "Okay." And that's essentially, when you get into consulting or training, that's what that industry's like. So just find your passion.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Lawrence.
Sure. 100% find your passion. A lot of us have fallen into this career, this line of business, because we loved what we did. Maybe IT or computers were a hobby, and we wound up falling into a niche of cybersecurity. I know that's been my journey. For any students who are out there, I know FIU has a fantastic cybersecurity curriculum. If anybody here can influence the next generation, FIU here in Miami-Dade County and Miami-Dade College also has a fantastic cyber curriculum. For those students that are still maybe in high school, look for internship opportunities wherever you can. Reach out to friends of friends. A lot of us are happy to mentor, happy to help form that next generation. Be open to helping anyone you can.
Thank you. I thought it was because you love working with Lars.
I do.
No?
Also,
Yes?
yeah.
Okay. Morgan.
I'll back into it by way of a story. How many people have heard the phrase "think outside the box"? Okay.
Yes.
How many people know where it came from? The problem is we use a phrase to describe an outcome we want to achieve, yet we don't understand where it came from. And where it actually came from was from Gestalt psychiatry. It's called the 3-dot problem. You get 3 dots, 3 rows of 3 dots, connect all 9 dots with 4 straight lines. And we've been taught all our life to color within the lines, to follow the rules. So my advice to you students is question everything. Question authority, ask why. Alfred Deming, I think, said ask why 5 times. But it's the only way to solve that problem is to go up and outside the box, come down and over, come back over, and then come back up. There's 2 areas, here and here, where you go outside the box. That's where the real value comes from. It's your ability to get outside the constraints. We have to act within the law, but there's nothing illegal about thinking outside the law. How would I do this if? It's the ability to ask questions. It's the ability to critically think. Do not take what people have written as gospel. If we did, why is Elon Musk's rockets different shapes and sizes than NASA's? Because we relied so long for solid rocket boosters to be brought in on rail cars. Rail cars have a defined width. Who defined the width of a rail car? Roman chariots, 2 horses. So our program was based upon Roman chariots, where Elon said, hey, if rockets can take off, why can't they land? And that changed the face of everything. So it's if I were going to give you a piece of advice, ask the tough questions. Don't take the first answer as gospel, and keep drilling down and asking why until you've satisfied yourself, you've learned, you can critically think. And if you really do want to think outside the box, cia.gov/jobs. Just go there.
Outstanding. Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, so I think cybersecurity is an art and a science, and I think sometimes there can be a lot of fluff or just really broad terms, but I think ultimately you have to find the area that you love. So I think if you're like to reverse engineer software, maybe malware analysis is good for you. If you like how things communicate with each other, something along the side of network security would be really good for you. But there's also the sciences around software engineering and software architecture that can be directly applied to cybersecurity. And many people assume that you absolutely need cybersecurity background, 20 years of experience. It's actually the innovative minds that actually use software and software engineering principles, which are foundational, and use those principles towards cybersecurity. I'm a big believer also with AI, big data science. Generative AI is going to change everything. So if you're into AI and that sort of thing, both for threat hunting as well as for defense, and how that can be applied, I think is going to also change the landscape completely in terms of what we're doing today. Do what you love, something that doesn't feel like work to you, but also don't be afraid if you haven't done cybersecurity to apply the skills that you're learning that are foundational into this area as well. So,
Is iBoss hiring?
Always highly skilled, yes, for sure. But talent is actually the most important.
Absolutely. Thank to our distinguished panelists for sharing your valuable insights and your expertise on the critical issue of cybersecurity with a focus on critical infrastructure. We hope that this discussion has shed light on the complexities and the challenges of this topic. Clearly, it is applicable to all our industry sectors, to government, to small businesses, to individuals. We all should learn everything we can about protecting our digital information. So I think we have 3 minutes. Do we have time for questions? Do we have time for a couple of questions? 2 questions. Anybody? The panel? Sir.
Get a $20,000 used genetic synthesis kit to my garage, CRISPR kit, and at best, I can prolong life. I can cure disease. At worst, inadvertently, I could create the next pandemic. What do you suggest? What are the lessons learned?
What do you think, Morgan?
Cyber physical biological convergence.
That's a Tom Clancy novel coming out. No, seriously, it's like, how do you think most of this stuff happened? It's the art of the possible, right? So when you look at biological stuff, that is one of the things. By the way, do you guys know that you can hide passwords inside DNA? You can create synthetic DNA, hide it inside your body, and only if you know what strain you're looking for, pull it out. Here's my concern about that, and this actually is a plot for a novel. If I'm breaking into all of these places and collecting DNA, or I'm acquiring DNA legally because I'm a foreign adversary who's buying up DNA labs, I now have your DNA. That's not something you're going to change. Imagine the ability for me to target and create a very specific designed disease or virus that attacks only the person with this exact DNA structure. The problem is with the guardrails, pick your favorite analogy, the toothpaste out of the tube, we've run out of runway. There is no taking it back. What we've got to do is, quite frankly for me, better intelligence. We have to have a more robust intelligence community, more robust reporting capability for things like this. But I could go on, but anyway, but it's like, if there were an easy answer, somebody would have done it by now. That's one of the things when somebody said, what you think the future is, I think people who can do stuff like that's going to help.
Thank you so much. So once again, thank you for joining us for this discussion, and we hope to continue the conversation and work toward a safe and secure. Do you have one more question? One more question? Okay, great.
Just one more, because I have to talk. I want to first start by thanking everybody that was able to make it out today. Thank you, panel, for taking the time to speak. I just wanted to add, if you have the opportunity to mentor, and the reason I'm up here is more for Lawrence, Because the reason I'm in the field that I'm at is that and throughout my bachelor's degree, somebody came up to me and said, hey, what are you doing with your life? Come into cyber, like you're saying now. And that goes for everybody in here. We all have the opportunity and the power to influence one of the younger generations that's growing up. Please take the opportunity to do that. Lawrence has been, I would say, my third mentor in my career, so I appreciate you, and Patrick and everyone else in this room. So just wanted to say thank you, and great question and dialogue, everyone.
Thank you so much. Once again, thank you. Thank you to the panelists.